Welcome back to the American Tradition for Friday, December 17th. Get ready for your Blitzkrieg weekly roundup. I am Jeremy Mack, pastor, farmer, localist, essayist. Let's get started. First thing we want to do today is take a quick look over in the area of a little bit of pop culture history. So one of the things I try to do is bring a special interest article each week. And you may not be interested in these type of things, but I am. And we'll start out with the Zodiac Killer. If you look at the Zodiac Killer, you might remember a great Jake Gyllenhaal movie from back in the early 2000s on the Zodiac. Well, I was unaware that not all of the ciphers had been cracked. And it looks like 51 years later, we have a Zodiac Killer cipher has been solved by amateur code breakers. Very interesting development in the story. They had hoped it might lead to identifying the Zodiac Killer, which is sort of up in the air. They've never quite been able to identify him. But anyway, if you're interested in those types of things, check out this story, which we'll have in the show notes on the YouTube page. And we've got this great headline here. Hungary amends constitution to redefine family, effectively banning gay adoption. Now, I just found the headline hilarious by NBC News. Hungary amends constitution to redefine family. Now, technically it is right, but the idea that Hungary is redefining family by making family a husband, wife, and children is sort of hilarious. And notice they put it in the headline that way. Good for Hungary. Hungary always being a foundation stone over there in Europe. Them and Poland. Let's come home to the U.S. This is not new news, but I mentioned it last week. Eric Swalwell, a man who occupies a very small district in California that has a super safe seat, who won by like 75%, who is sort of a Swalwell. He's, the way I think of him is obnoxious and smug. But Eric Swalwell and the Spy. Here we have Eric Swalwell. There he is. You might remember him from a presidential run he had in 2020, but then again, maybe you won't because he didn't make it, but about a month or two in, had zero support. But now we find out he was involved in a sexual relationship with a spy from China. And this is not the first California politician to be embroiled in a spy ring. So we have here also Dianne Feinstein. This is from 2018 and the spy. So both Swalwell had a staffer placed in his office by a spy. So the woman that he had, a Miss Fang, who we do not really know who she is, she ended up jumping on a plane, was warned by someone that the feds were onto her, and she fled the country. But she helped to place an intern in Swalwell's office, and Dianne Feinstein has the same issue. She also had a Chinese spy in her office, and I believe he was her driver, which leads us to a quick story about how China is targeting California. So this is a lot about the Christine Fang story, who's the one that Swalwell had the relationship with. And it's not fair to just say they're targeting California. Obviously, you may have noticed recently in the news that Governor Kemp in Georgia has sort of some, not accusations of sexual misconduct, but there's a lot of things out there where he has been trying to build a relationship between Georgia and China for business purposes. It's one of those things where we have to be really careful and note that it's not always good to be embroiled in international trade like that. Do we want Georgia to be financially successful? Of course we do, but we also need to be people who buy our own products and who support Georgia ourselves. So the key question is why did an alleged Chinese spy try to infiltrate California politics? She worked among many people She even had relationships with some Midwest mayors. So you can just see, though, that California was particularly targeted by China, has been a particular target of China. So in our Babylon Bee Sting of the week, this is a picture of Swalwell and Christine Fang. Chinese spy assigned to date Eric Swalwell begs to be sent to a labor camp. That's hilarious. All right. In the rumor mill, so doing a little rumor mill work here today. I may have a regular sort of segment in this, in the inside of the Blitzkrieg news weekly news roundup. Loud arguments in U.S. Supreme Court chambers over Texas lawsuit. Now, this is kind of what was released from one of the people who work, a clerk inside of the justice's offices. So we don't know the clerk. They want to remain anonymous. That's why I call this the rumor mill. Who knows if stories like this are true, but I can imagine that there was some serious disagreement over the Texas lawsuit. So the story details that Thomas and Alito were for taking the case, which they did vote to take the case, but it was more John Roberts exploding over the idea that if they took the case and actually realized that there was likely in Pennsylvania and in Georgia and several other states election violations because there were changes made not by the legislatures but by either courts or unnamed bureaucrats, but the Constitution puts elections into the hands of legislatures, that they'd actually taken those cases, they probably would have had to side with the Constitution. But who knows? You can never trust courts in the United States these days to side with the Constitution. And then coming out of Texas, along with that lawsuit, we have Texas GOP chair, that would be Allen West, floats secession for law-abiding states after Supreme Court defeat. Did he really promote secession? I mean, he did wonder aloud whether or not the states that wanted to continue to abide by the Constitution might continue to consider forming a union of their own versus those states that appear to not want to abide by the U.S. Constitution. Maybe they should be two separate unions. And so I suppose you can say he floated secession, but there is a bill, I believe, right now in the Texas legislature to consider secession. Look for a special edition of the American Tradition soon. I would like to talk more about secession and give you some ideas on how secession is really a very much a part of the American tradition overall. We seceded from England. Now the North, the war between the states, the Civil War, was an unsuccessful secession. But I would say in our geographic region, we are 1 for 2 on the secession front. And so secession falls within the American tradition. And I'd like to talk just a little bit more about that in the future. Now, here's just a good story. Patrick J. Buchanan, Whither America After the 2020 Election. He says in the opening few sentences here, though secession is unlikely, and I agree with him, a secession of the heart has already taken place in America. I also agree with that. We are two nations, two people, seemingly separated indefinitely. Can a nation so divided as ours, racially, ideologically, religiously, still do great things together, as did the America of days gone by, to the amazement of the world? That's a very good question asked by Patrick J. Buchanan. And Patrick Buchanan's a man who's now up in his 80s, but sharp as a tack. And if you were to go back and look, some of you may not know who he is. He was actually a presidential candidate back in the 90s. He won, if memory serves, New Hampshire, and looked like he might be on his way to getting the Republican nomination. But Patrick J. Buchanan is what someone might call a paleo-conservative versus a neo-conservative. You may be familiar with the term neo-conservative. People like Sean Hannity would be a neo-conservative. Paleo-conservatives are older. That's what the word paleo means, older versions of conservatism. And if you were to go back into the 80s and 90s and listen to Patrick Buchanan speak and look at his writings, you'd find that this man has almost been right about everything. So if you get a chance to read the essays that he writes, please grab this one. Look in the show notes. We'll always post these things in there for you. All right, back to the official news front. Congress close on stimulus will include new round of direct checks, nixed state and local funding, and liability protections. I have no idea why the feds would be sending money to state and local governments. States and local governments should be autonomous and sovereign and self-sufficient. And so I'm glad they're not sending any money to the state and local funding. Let's talk about this new round of checks. So some of you may be looking for those big checks that you got before. John Thune tells reporters, this is Laura Litvin. Laura Litvin covers the U.S. Senate and 2020 elections for Bloomberg News. John Thune tells reporters a 1 to 2 day stopgap measure may be needed to prevent the government shutdown. In other words, he's saying they probably won't reach a deal today, while stimulus deal still under negotiation. He says a goal is to keep stimulus checks to $600. May have to lower income cap to keep cost down. So $600 is likely what you're looking at for your stimulus check. If you were hoping there were going to be some bills paid after the government shut your small business down and drove you into the ground and into bankruptcy, good luck with that. Remember who you voted for next time this sort of thing comes around. Japanese authorities understood COVID-19 better than most. You might not know this, but Japan has undergone almost the least deaths. I think they have undergone the least deaths by the coronavirus as far as all the G7 industrial nations go. And what we notice is that they never shut down their economy and they never stopped going to school. So I wonder if there's another way to handle the COVID-19 crisis without totally destroying your economy and turning your people into anxiety-ridden and fear, at least 50% of your people into anxiety-ridden and fearful and unable to look toward the future because they just have no idea what's going to happen. In Japan, their economy stayed afloat and they did not shut things down, and they dealt with the COVID-19 virus in a different way than we have, and they've been far more successful. And then our final story for today, we see a shocking report on COVID-19 vaccine has adverse effects. If you were to read this story, and I will publish the note I will give the link in the show notes, excuse me. This is from the UK, and The Guardian has a story that people with a history of significant allergic reactions should not receive the COVID vaccine, the medicines regulator has said after 2 NHS workers experienced symptoms on Wednesday. All right, this is one of the things that happens when you warp speed a vaccine and then you start trying to inject people without having done all the testing that's necessary to recognize whether or not that vaccine is safe. What they're discovering now is that people who have previous difficulty with anaphylactic shock and allergic reactions to previous vaccinations, to medicines, and to food allergies. I myself have 2 food allergies. One is an anaphylactic reaction, and so I will not be taking the COVID-19 vaccine. But of course, I wasn't going to take it before as a political statement. But it looks like it may not be safe to be taken at all if you have, say, a peanut allergy or tree nut allergies or other food allergies. And in Great Britain, they are suggesting that you have life-saving apparatus on site at every injection site, meaning at every site where you plan on doing the injections because of rapid anaphylactic shocks. So that's just a little bit more about the COVID-19 vaccine. The American tradition is not anti-vax all the time, but we do want to take the time to ask the question, how much power should we give the government? Should we give the government power over mandatory medical treatments? In the same way we would say no about mandatory medical insurance, that's leveled at us as a tax. Thank you, John Roberts, and the Obamacare legislation in which he helped to write. We do not believe the government should have the power to force people to buy products or to force people to take mandatory medical procedures. And so we believe in the individual because we believe in the American tradition. That's all for today. We'll see you next time on the American Tradition. Until then, God bless you all.